with two of my co-founders, we started a company really focused around identifying who you are in a very particular context. And after some time, we broadened our focus really around passwordless authentication and helping enterprises kind of solve that for many more use cases than just what we had in mind initially. We are HYPR, the identity assurance company. We're based out of New York since 2014. And what we built is a platform built around passwordless authentication and identity verification. I think the most interesting thing people get wrong about identity security is that you will still find people today who think that the password is fundamentally secure versus using a biometric that can't leave your device. People's assumption is we're still living in these kind of detective sci-fi movies from the 60s where, well, if my fingerprint is left on a glass door somewhere, or if they print out a copy of my face, they could use it instead of me. But passwordless technology today is far more advanced than just taking a copy of my image and putting it in front of a camera. It really requires both the biometrics as well as trusted, secure hardware on the device itself. People still do think, in many cases, that if I have a password, it's in my head and therefore no one can guess it, but then you quickly tell them, well, what prevents someone in Thailand from just typing that password in from wherever they're sitting? And usually you get kind of an aha moment after that. One of my co-founders likes to jokingly say that I put the corp in hypercorp. Like I tell a lot of people, you can have entrepreneurial experiences even at a large business like Goldman or many of the other large financials or businesses that are in New York and elsewhere. A lot of it does depend on what role you're in, what the upside is, and how much ownership you get. But these things can set you up well to eventually start your own company or work as part of a company in an early role. A good thing that you get at a place like Goldman or Oracle or elsewhere is foundations. Like you sit with really smart people, highly disciplined people. There are processes and procedures in place. You're going to understand how a corporation thinks, especially if one day you plan to sell to corporations like that. Being on the inside of that helps you to do better when you're selling to them and understanding their point of view. So if you think you're going to go into B2B sales, spending some time there might not be a bad idea. Was there a specific moment where I felt I had to make the plunge? I think it was probably an interesting time in my life where I was approaching probably 4 or 5 years at Goldman, and I really started to think carefully about which one of these ideas would make the most sense. I had a few ideas in my own head. None of them made me want to go take the plunge, so I wasn't too excited. And what really did it for me ultimately was starting a company by yourself is very challenging. And so you need to ask yourself, if you're not quite sure you could do everything, having a really good team around you is like step 0.
Everybody's really, really passionate about what they do. Like, it's really a breath of fresh air to be able to know that different departments that we maybe don't even work next to each other every day, but it's so inspiring just to hear somebody really just be really into what they do.
The culture of grit and respect and transparency, and then also just it comes from leadership and bleeds its way down into the entire org. And I think it's really special to be able to work at a company where you have direct access to leadership and they have any question is a good question type of thought process and policy.
The culture here is very close-knit. I think there's a good core group of us that are in the office quite frequently. Really made some good friends here at HYPR, and it's really focused around having a great kind of office to work out of.
Yeah, so we were finishing up a lease elsewhere, and it's been an exciting time for us. I mean, we're growing well. We have a pretty good presence here in New York, and we always want to be New York centric. So when we looked for, the next lease for us, we prioritized, of course, location, of course, price. But as far as the building and the management company, we really loved the fact that Nomad in particular, is building its own brand, is building a very strong focus. But I could see that, Matt and the team and their collaboration with Justin is just great. And we would have the support we need as we scale. We wouldn't get this sort of big corporate experience, but we also wouldn't get this, nobody small, tiny, old building experience either. If you're gonna ask somebody to leave their house and go to a building multiple times a week, it's gotta be a nice building. It's gotta not have clanking pipes or broken bathrooms or lights going out that can't get fixed. I think the level of service, on the asset management and everything else side of things, Nomad is second to none in my opinion. So it's been an all-around great experience. People are happy to come to the office, and that's really the kind of environment you want to start with. And that comes down to flooring, lighting, the attention to detail. They built this space from scratch with us together, and in the time frame that we thought others wouldn't have possibly completed it that quickly, but they did. We've been in WeWorks, we've been at medium-sized places, we've been in Class B, I think we're in Class B right now, and we've seen that whole different experience. We had the option to potentially move to California or elsewhere when we started the company, and there are certainly good reasons to do that too. We said, look, we're going to be where the customers are, and we had an edge, and we still have an edge. There are not that many cybersecurity companies in New York that are New York focused, not just a second Tel Aviv office or something like that, like an actual New York company. And so it's a competitive advantage for us. Customer reach is great, and the talent density in New York just continues to get better. You have to find a team like that that's willing to work as hard as you will, that won't take no for an answer, and will push through. And to have that kind of trust and commitment, it's not every day that you will find those people. So when you have that kind of a team, you have to ask yourself, is it worth taking the chance right now and doing something that I'm going to enjoy, or potentially think whether I'll be able to see that again later? And later might never come. Later could come a year later. You just don't know. But I don't like to live in regret. And my feeling at the time, and same advice I give a lot of people who are still at a large bank or elsewhere, is your opportunity cost if you do that and get it wrong, whatever you think it might be, it's never as bad as it actually is. The potential, if this worked out, and if I could enjoy doing what I love even more so than I did, that's worth everything in the world. And look, I think we took a very unique journey, right? Most of the startup advice you'll hear, whether it's California, New York, or elsewhere, is start with a niche, small, focused use case, do that really well, get hundreds of customers, work your way towards enterprise. And we literally did the exact opposite. We went to a consumer electronics show with a view of what we were building at the time. We got excited. We ultimately didn't pursue that. We went in a pivot. We heard people were interested in some other things we could do, and we started building towards that instead. We were early proponents of the FIDO Alliance. We were big on passwordless authentication, and we saw where the market was going as far as device-level security and more. My co-founder Boyan actually reached out to our earliest customers on LinkedIn, just asking for feedback. And I always say this is proof that you can get customers using cold outreach on LinkedIn. It's good if your title doesn't sound like you're going to sell to them. So he was able to do that really successfully, and one thing led to another, and we thankfully had our earliest customers in Aetna and MasterCard. I think when you speak to customers, you have to be honest about what you can deliver, when you can deliver it, what you can't do, and why it needs to be a certain way. If you're truthful in what you say to customers, look, you're not the first vendor that they've worked with. They've worked with thousands of startups in some cases. It's just like being on the other side of a poker table. If you're not truthful about what you're saying, they've seen the show 1,000 times. They can tell if there's BS on the other side, and they won't buy from you. The earliest customers are buying you not just because it's a cool thing that you're doing, or you have something someone else doesn't have. Build or buy is always a choice, and there may be someone else in the garage doing something similar. They're buying because they're looking at you and they believe in what you actually are going to deliver. And we're in a interesting, scary world now where everyone is using AI to make contracts. That's better than trying to make one out from hand. But is it really that much better? You have to ask yourself for certain things, whether it's understanding regulations, policies, procedures, or customer contracts or miscellaneous contracts, work with counsel. That's the reason why they understand this information, do a lot of research, and you need to benefit from that. You should come armed and prepared, otherwise they will, take as much money from you as you've been able to raise. But talk to your counsel, build with that in mind, talk to other people in the industry, talk to your customers, what have they seen not go right. But a lot of times for us, it's about staying ahead of these regulations by either joining industry working bodies, attending necessary events, actively talking with more than one counsel at large firms and small firms that focus on these kinds of things, and making sure that our policies are in place, as well as our export controls, how we handle PII, AI usage, like all of these things are non-trivial. And if you get one of these things wrong, you're starting back from stage one, because once you lose trust, it's a very difficult road to get it back. When people think of HYPR 5 years from now, I want them to think about identity security and what HYPR is doing to move that market forward and helping us all to not have to think about security. I'm happy to be in this place, and the business that we have with Nomad and the relationship is just, see you guys win more. Love it.